Hi, I'm Johnny Temple from Akashic Books, and I'm very happy today to be speaking with best-selling author Michael Zadoorian, whose new novel has just come out, The Narcissism of Small Differences. He's a lifelong resident of the Detroit area. Welcome, Michael. You have referred to your new novel as a Motor City comedy of manners. What the hell does that even mean?
That probably does. It sounds like those two halves of that sentence probably shouldn't be together, Motor City and Comedy of Manners. But I really think it is. I wound up wanting to write a book that was, I think, sort of about, I love the books of Dawn Powell, and she wrote all those wonderful New York novels during the 40s and the 50s. And I kind of wanted to write my own version of one of those. They were always full of like really sparkling dialogue, and they usually involve this sort of coterie of creative types. And and I live in a town just outside of Detroit called Ferndale. It's literally a mile from 8 Mile, if you've ever heard of that movie. It's a town kind of filled with lots of creative types and lots of musicians and writers and public radio people and teachers and all different kinds of stuff. And so it really felt like a good place to put one of those sort of stories and have like this group of kind of creative types interacting with each other. The whole story revolves around Joe and Anna, this sort of Gen X creative class couple, and their friends, and it's sort of their work and basically just the life they've created for themselves. And as they get older, they're approaching 40, and they kind of go through a sort of couple's identity crisis. I wanted it to be funny. That was the main thing. I really wanted it to be funny. It's a very chatty book, but also I think it's got something to say, and certainly about Detroit too. There's a lot. Detroit's pretty much one of the characters in the book because it takes place in 2009, and I don't know if that wasn't a good time anywhere, but it was particularly bad in Detroit.
Can you talk a little bit about the role that dilapidated buildings play in your novel?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, there's around that time in Detroit, there was Detroit was being exploited a lot for their abandoned buildings and dilapidation and that sort of thing. And it became a real thing here in Detroit that people would go and do like this, so-called urban exploration, and some people where they would basically tramp around abandoned buildings. And at that time, Detroit had, they had a surplus of abandoned buildings that had just been kind of, just left there to molder until someday maybe Detroit would, come back. One of the characters gets pulled into this world where he gets a chance to go into some of these buildings, and some of it happens at a time in his life where everything honestly is, not to be so literal, but falling apart, and his life seems like it's falling apart, and there's a sort of abandonment there. So it kind of ties in nicely. It ties in nicely with the Detroit of that era.
Do you think your COVID experience will have any impact on the fiction you write in the near future? I understand this to be a bit of a tricky dynamic, since so many fiction writers are experiencing the same thing right now.
Yeah, I don't see how it can't affect the fiction that's going to come out of this. I'm working on a new book right now, and I'm very pleased that I'm on the third draft of it, and because I have a structure to work with, and I'm if I was trying to come up with something new right now, I think I would be just floundering. And I have heard from other writers that it's really hard to just focus. It's hard to feel like, does this matter? And so I think ultimately there will be a kind of whatever, uh, PTSD fiction that will come out of all of this, that, that I don't see how it can't